On Monday morning, nearly all the social media dominoes fell for Alex Jones and his controversial media empire InfoWars. In rapid succession, Apple, Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify removed Alex Jones and InfoWars content from their sites and services. Pinterest soon followed. Yes, Pinterest is still a thing, and apparently some 10,000 people followed Alex Jones and InfoWars over there. It kept getting sillier as LinkedIn then banned Alex Jones. I guess you'll have to connect with him professionally elsewhere. And I couldn't believe this is real, but yes, even YouPorn released a statement saying that Alex Jones is too offensive for their site. Just how bad is it? Twitter is now the voice of reason. That's how bad. Twitter is one of the few platforms still allowing an Alex Jones and InfoWars presence. A company spokesman says Twitter doesn't yet see Alex Jones violating their terms of service, but they'll keep an eye on it. And that's exactly the reason these other social media platforms are giving for banning Alex Jones. Violating their terms of service, mostly for quote-unquote hateful content, not necessarily fake news. Facebook says it was repeated violations of community standards, specifically that Jones had promoted hate speech against transgender people, Muslims, and immigrants. A YouTube spokesperson says Jones violated their policies on hate speech and harassment. Apple blames violation of their hate content policy. Pinterest says they remove content that could lead to harm, and that they aim to maintain a safe, useful, and inspiring experience for their users. I'm not the greatest Alex Jones or InfoWars mind. I've never really paid attention to his content, other than the viral memes that come out of it, like interdimensional shape-shifting child molesters.
How'd the pedophiles get in control of AI?
The pedophiles at a whatever level,
rule.
The devil, whatever you want to call it, this interdimensional thing that gives them advanced off-world technology, the fallen one that's not of this world, is giving them advanced knowledge
What
on
are
how
you
to
talking
construct
about?
these systems.
He's definitely high as fuck.
And of course, the government turning the friggin' frogs gay.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. Serious crap.
So I spent much of Monday evening diving down the internet rabbit hole, trying to find the most offensive or threatening Alex Jones content that I could to understand what these social media companies banning him are talking about. What is the hate? What are the threats? Since these companies don't tell us specifically, I have to guess myself. The worst or most controversial Alex Jones and InfoWars material I could find falls generally into two categories: conspiracy theories about sexuality and conspiracy theories about high-profile deaths. Alex Jones has said that the transgender movement is about replacing natural human biology with augmented humans, or cyborgs.
I said I would get to what the whole trans movement's about. The most protected class are going to be augmented humans, cyborgs, you name it.
He's also said that homosexuality is due, at least in part, to chemical manipulation by the government.
But the reason there's so many gay people now is because it's a chemical warfare operation. I have the government documents where they said they're going to encourage homosexuality with chemicals so that people don't have children.
The idea that the government developed gay bombs to deter war and control the population is the origin of the famous gay frogs rant.
If you're a new listener, just type in Pentagon tested gay bomb on Iraq. They didn't consider using it. They've used it on our troops. What do you think tap water is? It's a gay bomb, baby.
Beyond that, there aren't many high-profile deaths for which Alex Jones hasn't had a conspiratorial explanation. He got into the most trouble for saying the Sandy Hook school shooting was fake, a staged false flag.
Sandy Hook is a synthetic, completely fake, with actors, in my view, manufactured. I couldn't believe it at first.
Jones has more recently walked that view back.
I tend to believe that children probably did die there. But then you look at all the other evidence on the other side, I can see how other people believe that nobody died there.
But he's also facing lawsuits over his claims, which may influence his more tempered tone. In any case, it's not just Sandy Hook deaths that were ploys for nefarious purposes. Carrie Fisher was killed by Star Wars producers to make the movie more profitable. Joan Rivers was killed by the Obamas for outing Michelle as a tranny.
The famous comedian Joan Rivers said, of course everyone knows she's a tranny. She's dead serious. Yeah, she's a man. Deader than a doornail in a routine operation where basically she had fire poured down her throat, was a fire-breathing goblin.
You know, it seems odd that the globalist elite subtly kill off anyone who challenges them, even in the slightest. Yet Alex Jones himself never has an unfortunate, unexplained accident, even though he exposes them every single day. But what's a good conspiracy theory without a few holes, right? And that's the point. You might view Jones's commentary as baseless or wrong on the facts, maybe even morally wrong in cases where he's cast doubt upon the victims of tragedy. But based on everything I've seen, I don't see cases where he's promoting hate, let alone encouraging violence. I see him spreading ideas that might be distasteful, but these are simply unpopular explanations for observations we make in the public domain. These are unpopular opinions these social media companies have scrubbed, not threats of violence or even targeted hate against a particular group. And if you aren't standing for a man's freedom to express his opinions, at least on principle, even for opinions that you hate, you aren't standing for free speech at all. You are only standing for speech that you like. Actually, the First Amendment only protects you from government. Yeah, I'm not talking about the First Amendment. I'm talking about free speech, the cultural value. Free speech, the idea that you can say whatever you want, and if I don't like it, I'll challenge you to debate the idea. Or I'll move along in pursuit of something that's more to my taste. And this is where two values that I've been talking about for months clash. Free speech and free association, not just as legal concepts that prohibit government intervention, but as cultural concepts that guide the way we treat each other. On the one hand, I do believe it is crucial that we uphold free speech culturally, that all the values and philosophy that form the basis of the First Amendment are equally valid when applied to social interaction. I won't silence you for the same reason I don't want government to do it, because I believe that your thoughts and your expression of them are your autonomous right, and because I believe in the marketplace of ideas. If your ideas are terrible, they will be defeated in a free and open competition. I believe that overall, society will flourish when we all uphold these principles. Now, on the other hand, I also believe strongly in a right to free association. The idea that nobody ought to be forced to associate or do business with somebody who violates their conscience, or even somebody who they just plain don't like for any reason. It's why I've covered the gay wedding cake issue so frequently. I believe that only you own your labor, that only you own your property, and thus these things can only be exchanged justly when you voluntarily agree to exchange them. Nobody ought to be forced into that exchange or that association. Thus, I will acknowledge, of course, that Alex Jones doesn't have a right or an entitlement to a platform on any of these sites, if these sites don't wish to provide him with one. I just want to promote a culture where free speech is seen as a higher value than suppressing opinions you don't like. Here's where the complication begins. I have long argued, and still will generally, that the market tends to sort these issues out, that most businesses prefer your dollar to personal pettiness, that in the case of the wedding cake, for example, most bakers would prefer your money to their personal beliefs. Thus, if one baker refuses to serve you, don't support that baker with your dollar. Instead, take your dollar somewhere else. And that's the free market in action. One business refusing an opportunity creates an opportunity for a competitor to seize. Operative word being competitor. My perspective on this issue relies upon competition. What we have in this case, however, isn't competitive at all. It's coordinated. It's collusion, frankly. Are we really supposed to believe that Alex Jones just coincidentally violated all the terms of service on all these sites on the same day? Never mind the fact that none of these sites will point us to the specific ways Jones violated those terms. That's not what happened. What happened is a group of supposed competitors coordinated to oust a common political enemy, effectively barring that person from the market. Frankly, it baffles me that these companies prefer virtue signaling to the money Alex Jones brings them through traffic, but that is apparently the case, and it blows a hole in my preferred solution to this problem. There is no competition when the competitors collude. So what can we do? I see two paths, neither of which I'm very enthusiastic about, because one goes against my values and the other I'm not sure is very realistic. The first option is regulation. I hear a lot of people calling for the regulation of these social media giants as public utilities. The idea here being you extend the principles of the Bill of Rights to these companies and you force them to serve the general public without regard for race, gender, or in this case, perspective or worldview. And I can see the reasoning here. here. Internet speech platforms are, to some extent, base-level connections to modern American life, much like yesterday's landline phone or even electricity to your home. I really don't like the idea of forcing these businesses to serve people they don't want to serve, but the reality is we already do that in several other contexts. And maybe if we could achieve this sort of regulation with very narrow, specifically defined terms, we would actually serve the free markets of speech and association, albeit with some mild constraints on these businesses. The second option is my preferred on principle, but is admittedly less realistic to achieve. I want competition to take down these bad actors, not government force. And where competition is lacking, I believe it's our job as the opposition to create it. The problem is these social media giants are so big, it's hard to imagine a way to do that. The infrastructure needed to compete with Facebook or YouTube, for example, would cost billions of dollars, and the prospect for success likely isn't high enough to attract an investor willing to put up that kind of capital. The only way I can see this approach working is if we can strip these companies of what gives them value, their users and their creators. If, for example, the largest YouTubers coordinated to leave the platform for a competitor, if the Philly D's and the PewDiePies agreed to post exclusively somewhere else, their audiences and smaller creators like me would follow. The trouble with that plan is the difficulty of convincing guys who are earning millions on this platform to jump ship just on principle, without the promise of greener pastures elsewhere. So I really don't know. We've reached the point where the greatest threat to free speech is not the government. It's corporate power and a culture increasingly eager to wrap duct tape around the mouths it doesn't like. And how to solve that issue without violating the rights of others is a question that continues to elude me. What I do know is that all of this is alleviated when we promote a culture that upholds that famous value. I disagree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Instead, the prevailing attitude is I disagree with what you say, and I won't stop until there's nowhere left to say it. If we can flip the attitude of the mob, there is no need to regulate, because our dominant cultural attitudes already do that for us. Maybe it's a cop-out, maybe it's a fool's errand, but I'm going to keep trying to convince that mob that their own interests and the interests of society at large are better served when we defend each other's right to speak, not erode it. It doesn't produce immediate results, granted, and maybe I'll regret not advocating more drastic measures later if current trends don't reverse, but if you can just keep peeling off one mob member at a time with reason, eventually there is no more mob left. So for now, I'm going to try to just keep chipping away. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to come hang out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Okay, bye.